The new Resident Evil has been announced, shown at E3, and you've played the demo and it looks promising. Today on gameranx, here's how Capcom plans to change everything with Resident Evil 7. Producer Masachika Kawada had this to say about Resident Evil 7. I'm going to try to use my history with the series to bring out the horror feeling in this title. I want to bring a new kind of horror to players. And that's a good thing too, because Kawada is one of the people who's worked the longest on the franchise and has been around since Resident Evil 3. Director Koshi Nakanishi poses the question, how do we get people playing today to experience the same kind of fear they felt in 1996 with the first game? How do we bring that up to date and bring that emotion back? I want to note really quick that it's very interesting that one of the biggest changes is how focused on horror the people who are in charge of this game are. They seem to really care about making a scary game, and not just a quote-unquote zombie shooter, which some of the recent Resident Evils have, well, kind of been. This renewed focus on the scary elements of the game is definitely a welcome tone coming from the heads of the project. And if you've played or seen the demo, you can tell that it's very visibly different from the previous Resident Evil games. First off, it's in first person. Both Kawada and Nakanishi wanted to design the game so that players can experience horror in the most direct, visceral way possible. In fact, literally putting the player in the position of seeing what the character sees. In my opinion, this also emphasizes the shift to much more horror as opposed to survival horror, which are different genres. Horror being designed more to scare you, and survival horror creating a scenario you can get out of and rewarding you for doing so. A horror game has much more propensity to lean towards tragedy, which we very well could see. Not much of the story has been revealed, so who really knows? But it is set years after the events of Resident Evil 6, so in that respect it's not a reboot, as it isn't throwing away the story. The continuity is still intact, so the events that we've been through in the Resident Evil series are still things that happened in the world. But the perspective isn't the only thing that's changed, the engine has as well. Since Capcom is going for such a different feel, they've gone with a different engine, as opposed to keeping the one that they powered Resident Evil 6 and Dragon's Dogma with, designing it from the ground up for new-gen platforms, and no plans whatsoever to port the game to previous platform. That's a nice thing to know for everybody who knows how hindered games can be when the weakest link in the chain is an old console. Now, while it will lean a lot more on horror, it's probably going to contain survival horror elements, and it intends to evoke more of the appearance of Resident Evil 1 through 3 as opposed to the games that came after. The demo essentially functions as a prologue for the full game, but won't be a part of the full game itself. It's more intended to be a tonal preview, and I have to note that ever since Silent Hill's PT happened, we've been hoping somebody would make a damn game that plays like this. Konami obviously canceled Silent Hills, and various spiritual successors were being built on a few different engines from Unity to Unreal, and all of those projects got canceled as well. And I think the one that hurt the most was probably Allison Road, which went the way of the dodo not long ago. It seems like a lot of the projects that have been attempting to make this first-person, immersive horror game just never come to fruition, but it seems to me like Capcom decided maybe this is an opportunity. Resident Evil hasn't been looked at super favorably in recent years, and people really want this type of game. The gameplay of avoiding monsters and solving puzzles harkens to the PT trailer just a little bit, and it seems as though that itch is finally going to get scratched. The protagonist of Resident Evil 7 is an entirely new character, and not one that is quote-unquote a comic book superhero like Chris Redfield. We don't have a character name or character look, and whoever you play as in the demo is not the person that you're going to be playing as in the full game, but they promise that the person is more of a powerless, ordinary person, stuck in an extraordinary situation. We've already seen more in the way of supernatural elements in the demo than we've really ever seen in Resident Evil. There was a ghost, for instance, but the game is not intended to be a ghost story. Similar to the very first Resident Evil, the original game, Resident Evil 7 will take place in a derelict plantation mansion. The global scale terror of Resident Evil 6 will be brought down to a more intimate, personal scale, leading me to believe that there's a possibility what happened in Resident Evil 6 has pretty much taken care of itself. The world isn't in a state of panic anymore, perhaps thinking that these threats will be over for good. It is a few years after it, so maybe everybody thinks it's just calmed down. As we know, that's not going to be the case, and being Resident Evil is generally a zombie game, there's definitely going to be something involving zombies at this mansion, but who really knows what it could be? Could it be the Umbrella Corporation starting back up? Could it be another Parasite? Could it be something different altogether? I don't know. But again, being the game takes place in one specific mansion, it will harken back very much to Resident Evil 1, and the sort of what the hell is going on discovery style of story, where we learn about the world as we deal with something that we didn't quite expect or know how to deal with. And I think that will probably play into the style of gameplay in that they've said that players will have to deal with a limited supply cache, implying that there's going to be some kind of resource management in the game, probably rudimentary, but you never know, it could be more BioShock, it could be more BioShock Infinite, or it could be more System Shock, who knows? But it's not going to be run and gun style gameplay that harkens to the Call of Duty series. Instead, will call for much more calculated measures as you progress through the game. The hardest difficulty level will not be available immediately, except for people who've pre-ordered the game, and for some people that will matter, some people it won't. I personally prefer having to unlock the difficulty levels, but there are also a lot of people who really just like to feel completely helpless and dunk themselves into a situation that they can't possibly ever get out of. Another big development for some people is that the game will support PSVR entirely. The game will be completely the same in content, but will be designed to be comfortable and immersive for PSVR when in that mode. The developers went on to say, and I'm sure this is probably some kind of a joke, that they are not responsible if anything happens to you if you find it too scary. And they probably don't think anything's going to happen to anybody, but I have a feeling the game's going to be pretty scary. Nakanishi had this to say, in the 20-year history of Resident Evil, you know the key pillars of the game are fear and horror, exploration and environment, puzzle-solving elements, resource management, and combat against enemies. Those things are all in the game, but horror and exploration were focused on in the demo because they really wanted to show those two pillars up front. All of the other elements will be in the full game, but the demo was just there essentially to focus on horror, and it did a phenomenal job at that. Really, it got me excited for Resident Evil in a way that I have not been in a very long time, and seems as though it's probably going to be the refresher to the series that it is desperately needed for basically a decade. It also provides a game for all of us people who are excited for something like Silent Hills to finally happen. This one's actually going to happen. There's a lot of money invested, Sony themselves are invested, there isn't an irresponsible developer, well, at least arguably so. Capcom is nowhere on the level of Konami regardless of what anyone says, but all signs point to good. I'm optimistic about this game and I can't wait to play it. The demo got me stoked, as well as utterly terrified. It was legitimately scary in a way Resident Evil just hasn't been since Resident Evil 3. Are you looking forward to Resident Evil 7? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, and if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we will see you next time right here on gameranx.